everybody, and welcome to a new edition of the XPRIMM Time for Business show. We are starting today a series of three shows dedicated to the ESG notion. And together with top representatives of the Vienna Insurance Group, we will discuss and try to explore how adopting and implementing ESG standards may reshape insurers' way of dealing with environmental, social, and governance issues. In other words, what means ESG in the day-by-day insurer's business life? And today, our guest is Mr. Dieter Pscheidl, Head of European Affairs and ESG for Vienna Insurance Group. Welcome, Dieter. Happy to have you here.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me.
Dieter, there is a lot of talk about ESG, and probably who is trained to follow the business literature is encountering this term very often. And I would start in a little provocative manner, excuse me for this, by asking you, is ESG just another buzzword, another buzz notion, or is really a concern for society as well of the insurance world?
Let me start by stating very clearly that ESG or sustainability is not a short-term trend. It is a structural change. A structural change that we have hardly ever seen in economic history throughout the last decades. I just can remember one such structural change that was really fundamental for the real economy and the financial markets, and this was the fall of the Iron Curtain in 1989. There, things changed dramatically for Central Eastern Europe, I think to the better, when markets were opening up and new market structures, new market approaches were established. Now, sustainability or ESG is somewhat comparable to that because it is reshaping not only the financial industry, but also the real economy from the bottom of its functioning. We have in the European Union a very clear commitment on political level to climate neutrality until 2050. This is enshrined in the European climate law. So this is binding for all 27 EU member states. There is no exclusion to that. All the 27 committed by 2050. We want to be or have to be climate neutral in all different areas of our economy. So the so-called real economy of production, of services, industries, etc., and also for the financial sector. And until 2050, this sounds very far away, but things have to be done now to reach this target. It's not something you can fix by 2045 in the last 5 years. It's something we have to start immediately right now. If you want, in practical terms, it is a kind of a business plan for 28 years, which is massive, of course. Nobody does business plans for 28 years. That's clear. We do it for much shorter period. But in this case, it's a bit like that. So let me summarize maybe this general orientation of the whole economy. Again, it's the whole, it's also the real economy, not only the financial industry, is the reorientation, and it's a structural change that's really important. It's not something, you know, like a trend that seems to be attractive for one or the other. It is really a fundamental change.
So not only it is not a buzzword, but it's really a game changer in the long term and a strategic move also for insurance as for everybody else. And my proposition for you would be to take it step by step and look at each and every part of this notion, starting with the E, the environment issues. Climate change and its consequences comes to mind. Is that for insurer this E important also from other standpoints?
Yeah, thank you very much. Sustainability is best explained by the three sustainability factors, E, S, and G. So we will start with the E, which stands for environmental. And as insurers, and I think that's the good news for all our colleagues, this is not brand new because it's very much about physical risk. Physical risk that is changing over time. We see that the frequency and the intensity of a lot of natural perils is changing. Just think of floods, think of storm, think of wildfires, think of drought, think of hail. All these natural catastrophes are very familiar to the insurance sector. We are dealing with these risks for a very long time, so we have a lot of experience in that. And if you allow me, compared to the banks, we are in a much better position because we have already this experience how to deal with these risks. We have a lot of banks now knocking at our door saying, you insurers, you are so acquainted with these risks. Can you help us a bit how to price this? Because it's all about the pricing of these risks. And of course, as the nature, the intensity frequency of these natural events is changing, we also have to change. We see this also in conversation with our reinsurers, that things are evolving, so we will have to take a closer look at that. But again, the good news for our colleagues in non-life insurance is that the E in ESG has a lot to do with natural catastrophes they are perfectly dealing with already for a very, very long time. But next to the physical risk, we have the transition risk. And that's a quite new risk that will get closer into the focus, not only of our industry, but also of supervisors. What is transition risk? A transition risk is a risk that is generated because of the change either in regulation or in the market sentiment or by technology. So, and in sustainability, we have all of the three basically. We have a lot of regulation that is now changing, coming in from Brussels, the sustainable finance regulations. You heard about this taxonomy and so on, but we will talk about that a bit later. So we have changing regulation. We have to adapt. Otherwise, we run the risk of transition. We are too late, yeah, in history, and then that's the transition risk basically. The second is the appetite. The appetite of the market is changing. We have customers in life insurance now telling us, yes, I'm willing to invest in unit-linked life insurance, but can you assure the money I'm paying to you is not going into a fossil fuel company? I will not mention here any names, but we have customer groups, growing customer groups that address a lot of importance to that. They want to know what is financed with their premium. Of course, we don't have to speak about performance. This is always the most important topic. Of course, profit performance, without that, nobody exists. No insurer and customers will not be happy. But in addition, they want this. So it's the appetite. And the last one is also digitalization and other technologies, of course, that also create a certain transition risk. So in a nutshell, easily explained, transition risk means, and I think one very famous politician once said this, if you're too late, you will be punished by law, by life, sorry, not by law. And maybe also by
Maybe
law.
also
Yeah.
by law, yeah.
So maybe there's some truth in that mispronouncing. So this is all about these two elements. We have the physical risk and we have the transition risk. And with the transition risk, I think on the E, on the environmental topic, it is really important to go also with the flow. What is happening in all the different areas. We have a lot of progress, you know, when we look into property regulation, how property shall be constructed, how it shall be renovated. We speak here of energy efficiency. It has to increase. So a lot of topics there. Also, where are you allowed to build your property? This changes also a lot, looking a bit more in practice where you build your house and so on. But you see, in line with these examples, it's not so brand new what we're talking about. It's maybe reinforcing what we do already here. And on the mobility, transport is also a very important factor when it comes to sustainability. It's all about the e-mobility, that we think of that. Is it feasible? How can we manage that best? There will be a lot of challenges for claims in e-mobility. As we know, fire and so on have different connotation when it comes to e-mobility. So we'll have to build up much more underwriting expertise for e-mobility for sure. Yeah. So that's a bit the transition risk, not to be too late. And allow me, I spoke a lot about underwriting now, but of course also on the asset side, it's really important to see where are we invested in, to take a look into our investment portfolio. Are we invested in economic sectors that are future proof and like this also sustainability proof? Or are these probably sectors that will face a very difficult future and maybe we have to divest from these sectors because they will not generate the profit tomorrow that we experience today. And this is important in the interest not only of ourselves as insurers, but also for our customers that they still have the performance and the profit tomorrow. So under this notion, we will have to reconsider one or the other investment probably in the future. So that's about the environmental aspect that is fundamental. And maybe allow me one last sentence.
Yes.
Also, the reason why Brussels started with the E, the environmental, is not only because the climate crisis is so immediate and so burning hot in the narrow sense as well, but it is also because it's quite easy to measure. We measure in CO2. I always keep saying, you know, we now have a second currency in Europe. We have the euro and the other currency where we will measure the risk and our investments is CO2. This will be fundamental. CO2 has a price in several countries already. It will have a price in much more countries, but in the future, we will measure all our success, not only in euro and of course other local currencies, but also in CO2.
It is clear that insurers have a quite complex position in relation with these environmental issues, not also with their specific activities, providing insurance and coverage for the environmental related risks, but also as investors. And I would say also as a source of information and knowledge for the society in general, because they have this huge experience related to the natural risks. But what I would like to allow me to make a very short parenthesis related to this topic. Do you think that in the current situation, considering the energetic crisis that is looming over Europe, etc., are these issues related to the long-term plan of the green economy or the greener economy somehow postponed or drawn back because of the energetic crisis? Maybe the plans to divest the classical sources of energy, uh, pollution making, are somehow delayed?
Sure, things are different since the 24th of February this year. We are facing a new geopolitical environment that is very demanding, and along this new environment, we also have this energy crisis now. This is, from our perspective, even reinforcing the need to increase something that was a bit underestimated, from at least from my perspective in the past, and that's independence. We need independence from non-European actors. We need independence also from fossil fuel. Renewable energy we can produce on our own, we can produce in Europe, and with this be more independent from others. So independence is certainly a key word of our time and also of the future. So it is not mutually exclusive to go more into the green direction, but you addressed, Daniela, a very important point. What do we do until the moment when all these renewables will be available? Because obviously they take time. We see a lot of ambition and effort in many countries to boost renewable energy, but we are realistic and pragmatic. This is not done overnight. So therefore, exactly, we will need some traditional conventional energy production like fossil fuel a bit longer than initially planned, sure. And I can assure you that we as VIG are a partner for this. It is very important to have a stable and well-ordered transition to a green economy. So it's not done in a rush. It is not done with disruption. It is done with determination. That's clear. But we are strong and reliable partners of the countries and their societies, including the energy production. This is really important. We know in the market are other market participants that may have a slightly different view, that exit from certain activities rather fast. We think we have to stay with the economy and the society to support them both through investments and underwriting. I think this is really important because we need something in between. But again, let me underline this. This should not reduce our ambition and determination to transition as soon as possible to a green energy environment.
Okay, this is clear. Our long-term plans should stay in place and not be, at least its targets should not be affected. What about the S and the G in our three-letter standard
Yeah,
notion?
it is really a bit like three brothers, and the E is the big brother everybody's looking at, but there are two smaller brothers as well that are, from our perspective, equally important. Let me start at the very end with the G. What does it mean? Governance. In practical terms, this means like anti-money laundering, anti-corruption, tax honesty, and so on and so forth. And you know, when hearing this, immediately it comes to our mind, this is something, of course, we comply with already for a very long time. We are highly regulated sector as insurance sector, so therefore we have well-established boundaries for these topics addressing governance. As ESG, sustainability is addressing the whole economy, so the so-called real economy and the financial sector, we as a financial sector company, we as an insurance group, we are certainly very well regulated, and G is certainly not that kind of challenge compared to the E and the S. So the G, from our perspective, is well on track. We will monitor that, improve there and there if necessary. But again, for the financial sector, it's quite well in place. It's different with the S. The S, the social, is a very important one. At the moment, we have some social requirements also under the sustainability regulation that we find in the European Union, but it is only minimum social safeguards that we find here. What does this mean? It means that we have to respect minimum standards that are established by the OECD, also the United Nations, or the International Labour Organization when it comes to workforce related issues. But this is only part of the story. There are much more issues when it comes to social, and these are still under discussion in Brussels, that these famous taxonomy, so this language, this dictionary, what is sustainable and what not, will be then extended. So it is the workforce, I mentioned that already, but it is also, and I think that's very important, also adequate living conditions. This is a really important point, and we will, I think, touch upon that in another webcast when it comes to housing. Affordable housing is one of these topics that will be further elaborated under the S. But for the moment, we only concentrate on the workforce-related issues as it is required under European law. It's a very important topic, of course, but I think there are much more topics to be added to the S.
Of course. And I think that as time goes by, probably also DS will become more and more complex and extended once we get some more experience with these things.
If you allow me,
Yes,
Daniela,
please.
if you allow me, I mentioned also that environmental is much easier to measure and to manage because it's CO2. On social, the values and perceptions of what is social or not vary substantially between Sweden, Spain, Bulgaria, Austria, many other countries. So there are a lot of different perceptions, so it's much more difficult to measure and to manage that. But anyhow, it's very, very important. In particular, we as Vienna Insurance Group, we address a lot of importance to the S, the social factor.
Well, probably at least at this point, it's important not to forget about it and to do our best, each of us, to add something in this direction, even it is not measurable or comparable with the standards in other countries, but at least we can take some steps. I have read recently that two of the EIOPA's 7 key areas of activity in these years, from 2022 to 2024, are ESG related. And I'm quoting, integrating ESG risks in the prudential framework of insurers and pension funds, as well as support supervision of ESG risks and supervisory convergence in the EU. Well, what should insurers expect in this regard? What may come from this area of actions taken by EIOPA?
Yeah, let me translate these very
Yeah.
theoretical priorities of EIOPA a bit into practice. What does this mean in the real life of insurers? The first one is on risk management. We have seen an inclusion of the sustainability risk into Solvency II, predominantly market risk, credit risk, and of course, with no surprise, into the NatCat risk. But again, let me underline, this is not brand new for insurers. We consider these risks already for a very long time. Now it's also officially added to the legal text, and we will follow along this road also when we consider these different risks that I just explained, the physical risk on the one hand, and also the transition risk on the other hand. But we have further issues to follow. One, certainly that EIOPA is now looking into, and that's a very important point, is greenwashing. They are looking into the greenwashing risk. Maybe for the audience, what is greenwashing? Is greenwashing means you present yourself in a way that is not entirely correct. And let me say, this is sometimes done unintentionally, so that you maybe don't fully comply with some transparency requirements on your green products, and then you present probably your product much greener, much more sustainable than it actually is. And this is called greenwashing. This can have massive consequences because actually you're betraying the customer. You're not 100% transparent also with the supervisor. So this can have consequences in reputation. This can also have consequences in financial terms. And EIOPA is currently looking into this notion of greenwashing. They will come up with a final result how to assess and to supervise greenwashing by the middle of 2024. So it's still a bit some time, but it is really important that we stick to that, what we do, what we promise, but we should not exaggerate. So we as VIG say it's rather better to be a bit more conservative, to be on the safe side, not to exaggerate, and to say what we do, but also to do what we say, and not to present ourselves greener than we actually are. So these would be the 2 points in a nutshell: the risk management on the one side and the greenwashing, which means a lot about product design, product transparency, also sales. That's really important. From August this year, we have to take into account the sustainability appetite of our customers. So we have to add that to our list of questions that we ask to the customer. And also there, if the customer requests, I want to have a sustainable product, that this is really perfectly matching with what we actually sell. So this is all about the greenwashing risk, and we carefully monitor that, because again, it's mostly done not on intention, and therefore we have to be very careful with that.
Another parenthesis is not the case that all this may result in a trend of over-regulating or a little bit of over-informing and complicate the sales process in the industry, because sometimes, perfect, it's the enemy of better and the enemy of good. And if it becomes everything too complicated.
There you address something that is very close to my heart, and I think of many others in our sector. We think too much information kills information, and it might be wise to review all of that information, the tons of paper, if we still do that in a traditional way or also in a digital way, that we pass on to the customer. Is probably not that helpful as it should be, and therefore even the former chairman of EIOPA, Gabriel Bernardino, was exactly stating this: too much information kills information. So probably we should review this. And let me maybe add also one sentence: when it comes to sustainable finance, it's just an additional layer on what you already have. And therefore, I think it would be wise also to review that, which will be done in the next years. We should keep in mind the whole sustainable finance regulation coming in from Brussels was proposed and adopted at record speed. It was in December 2019 that Ursula von der Leyen was presenting the European Green Deal, including sustainable finance. It's one element of many elements of the European Green Deal. And since then, a lot of new directives and regulations have been adopted at very high speed. And we all know what happens if we go in legislative terms at very high speed. It's very often to the detriment of quality. And we're now confronted with definitions that don't perfectly match. We have different notions from one directive to the next or the next regulation. And I think this should be more consistent. So this would be also our central requirement to those who decide upon these issues. Please review that, create more consistency, that's important, and also maybe simplify things. Unfortunately, although the whole sustainability issue is a very good one. It's for the people, it's for the planet. So basically it's a good one, but the way it was put into the law is very, very academic. And I think we are losing the people with that. So it should be simplified. It should be made accessible for more people to be well understood and also supported. I personally, I'm a bit afraid if we continue like this with all this complexity, we will lose more and more people, and this would be very unfortunate because again, it's all for a very good cause. It's for the people and our planet.
Yes, but if it's presented in a very abstract academic way, it sounds like we were saying in the beginning, maybe like a buzzword. And this brings me to the conclusion of this interview with you. I think we have seen a lot of important things about ESG already. And I would go back to the title of our show, that was ESG or not to be. Shortly, what is your answer? Yes or no?
Certainly, it is ESG. As I said, it is a structural change. It is something that is at the core of our business. Some things we already do for a very long time, some other things will be added, but it's not something that is outside and should be respected. It is something that should be on everybody's desk, and this is also not at least also the expectation from our supervisors that everybody in an insurance company should deal with ESG. It should be the underwriters, it should be the asset managers, it should be the colleagues from compliance, it should be our colleagues from HR when it comes to workforce related matters. It should be on the table of our distribution colleagues and so on and so forth. So it's something that really addresses each and everybody in an insurance undertaking. And at last, it is certainly an opportunity that we can also expand our business.
Thank you very much, Dieter, for this discussion. Well, keeping in mind the last thing that you said, I can only invite our viewers to join us again for the next two meetings, so they can find more about ESG and the practical aspects of ESG in the day-by-day business in insurance. Until then, subscribe to our YouTube channel and keep in touch with us. We will come back with more interesting materials. Thank you very much. Goodbye.